I'm Nisha DeGaring.
And I'm DougJessop. Family Heritage Stories exist to give you ideas and examples of stories from the past to help shape the future.
It could be anything like a recipe from Grandma or a vacation location where your ancestors came from. These stories deserve to be passed down.
In this episode of Family Heritage Stories, we ask people to share a story about their grandma or grandpa.
We will also be finding out more about heritage and culture as we travel.
We all benefit from heroes among us. Now, they're going to say, it's just part of the job. But it's more than that. It's time for Hero Salute Stories.
We were in Vietnam. She was a Red Cross unit director. I was a platoon leader with an aviation reconnaissance platoon with an aircraft troop with the 101st. We met in a mess hall and struck up a conversation where we were at Camp Eagle. It was pretty far north in South Vietnam. And anyway, short version, I had an extra can of Arid Extra Dry spray deodorant, which you just couldn't come by where we were. And I gave her that can, and she gave me the rest of her life.
Wow. And Diane, from your perspective, how was meeting Ben for the first time?
It was very nice, very pleasant. But quite frankly, I thought he looked like an Ivy League guy, so I had no interest really until he gave me the can of Air Extra Dry. I have to tell you, he stood up in the middle of on the steps of his hooch. I was standing in the middle of a dirt road. No one was around. That was good. And he stood up and he said, on behalf of myself, General Zeiss, and the entire 101st Airborne Division, I present you, Diane Zetterval, which was my maiden name, with this can of Air Extra Dry. He had me at his sense of humor. I just laughed. It was so fun.
Oh, that's awesome. So, so you met in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when you guys get home?
Well, we'd made plans. Diane's parents were great about setting up everything for the wedding. My parents' family came, and it was a wonderful wedding.
It was a miracle, really, that we got together. Ben was from Tallahassee, Florida, and I was from Bellevue, Washington, and we met all the way on the other side of the world and fell in love. And I was stationed there at Eagle for a couple of months, and then I was promoted and transferred further south twice. And there's all kinds of stories which we won't go into about him getting to see me at Christmas and all those kinds of things. Wonderful. But and I came home about 2 weeks before he did. And then my parents and I met him at McChord Air Force Base, and he stayed with us a couple of days and then went on to his new assignment at Fort Rucker, Alabama, and that's where we were first stationed together, of course. And I was out of the Red Cross by then, but did lots of volunteer work throughout his Army career.
Right on. So I have one more question for you guys. So timeline-wise, so you meet in Vietnam, and, sometime later, you come home, you have this wedding. How long was it between those two, like, meeting, coming home, and getting married? How long were you guys?
Probably 8 months.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
I think that's a good guess.
Uh-huh.
About 8 months.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And
we talked to when I was down further south, we talked to each other every night on a phone system, which was really strange. I mean, it was like over and stuff like that. And there were operators.
We had to go through 5 operators. It was all landlines. on military crank phones. And the operators were fantastic. We knew they were listening, which is, we didn't care. We got to talk. And they did say some things once we got engaged, which was in Vietnam.
Yeah, it was like hooray or something like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with me.
Sure.
Hero Salute stories are made possible by the generous support of viewers like you. Go to fedorafoundation.org to donate today.
Have you ever wondered how an object becomes important enough to be passed down from generation to generation? Well, later in the show, we share one of our viewers' treasures remembered.
What a time for Ella to be away.
What do we eat, Dad? Are you gonna cook?
Yeah, sure, I'm gonna cook.
You? Oh, no. But what's for dinner?
Let's see. We've got fried chicken, turkey, Salisbury steak. Not bad.
Banquet uses many of the same good foods you might buy yourself. And Banquet is just as concerned about value as you are.
Well, Dad, you did it.
Sweetheart, there's nothing I can't do.
Banquet frozen dinners.
At Tim Hortons, there are a lot of good reasons to stop for coffee and donuts, like chocolate-dipped donuts, orange twists, donuts with whipped cream, honey crullers, famous Tim Horton Dutchies, and more. Of course, Tim Hortons service is always friendly and efficient. We're open 7 days a week, and the coffee is great. Yes, at Tim Hortons, there are a lot of good reasons to stop for coffee and donuts. But most of all, you meet the happiest people.
There's a special bond between grandparents and grandkids.
Tell me a story about your grandma or grandpa.
My mother's mother, Cecilia Rosa Clark, dressed all in white. I was about 5 and I would watch her get ready for work. She'd wear a white dress, white hose, white stockings. She had white hair and she'd stand in the mirror and fix her hair. I always thought she was a nurse. I was much older as a teenager when I discovered she worked for Helms Bakery in Los Angeles, and they had little trucks they'd pick up donuts and bread and cakes, and the trucks would do their routes through the neighborhood selling this stuff that she helped make. And she was not a nurse, she was a baker, and she actually did so well. She was Employee of the Month. She got to be in a commercial for the Olympics in Los Angeles. I can't remember what year. And I've looked and looked and looked for that commercial and I can't find it. But I always thought she was a nurse until I was older when I found out no, she was a baker.
So what do these stories, so you mentioned you're a genealogist. What's that mean to you?
I learned how to do research so that I could connect families, so I could connect descendants with their ancestors. I think I feel whenever I help someone find their ancestor or I find one of mine, there's like a snick that happens in your heart. And for me, I can hear it, I can feel it. I feel that puzzle piece, like, can you hear the sound of the puzzle piece when you put the puzzle and it goes, it just makes that little, it does that in my heart when I find an ancestor or when I help someone find one of theirs. And you remember, it keeps their memories alive. By helping them find their people, it keeps the memories of those people alive.
Okay, Robin, please say and spell your name.
Robin Hoyer, Robinheuer.
Okay, now, Robin, what was your maiden name?
Johnson.
Okay, just out of curiosity, where did you go to elementary or junior high?
East Whittier Junior High School in Whittier, California.
Okay, that just so happens to be the same as me. Just how is that, like crazy or what?
That is
totally serious. It's like, okay.
What are the odds? I'm Robin Hoyer. You're watching Family Heritage Stories. We'll be right back.
Your history is everywhere, if you know where to look. But searching through all this? Are you kidding me? Actually, Kindex makes it easy to gather records and add them to your online archive, so everyone can jump in and index their records, making every word searchable. With Kindex, I know them anyway.
And now, Dad Jokes with Mike Agrilius.
Why do flamingos stand on one leg? If they lifted both, they'd fall. And here's the joke that started it all off for this book. What's the difference between a well-dressed man on a bicycle and a poorly dressed man on a unicycle? A tire. All from the book, Whatever Floats Your Goat, the granddaddy of dad jokes for kids and old goats.
What does heritage mean to you?
Tell me, where's your heritage? Where do you remember where you came from?
Well, I was always told that I was half German and half English.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all I knew. Until about 3.5 years, well, 3 years ago, I visited Ireland with my now husband. And we were in the county of Wicklow, in St. Kevin's monastic site in the cemetery in Glendalough. And every time I walk underneath arches in Europe, I ask myself the same question. I say, oh, if you could talk, what would you say to me? Mm-hmm. And of course, they never do. But I always imagine all these stories, like, of the joys and the sorrows and the hardships and what lifted them and gave them strength. And as I proceeded into this cemetery, I passed under the arches, and they're double arches. So that will be a picture I want to give you.
Okay.
Because I want people to just see the magic and majesty of these. And I thought the same thing as I was walking under them, and I got to the other side, and clearly a voice spoke and just said one thing, Mary. I whipped around because I was with a tour group, and there was no one back there. I turned to John, and I said, did you just call my name? And he turned around, looked at me, and he said, no, but what's happened to you? I said, someone just called my name in the most loving, tender, remembering, like they'd been waiting for me voice. And he came over by my side, and we walked about 5 steps and looked down, and there was this gravestone that said John and Mary. And I paused for just a minute. He looked at me, we looked at each other, and I began to feel this vibration inside. Just then, the tour leader said, what are you guys doing? Everyone's left. Come on up. All right, so then, we quickly left. But the entire rest of the trip, and after I got home for a couple, 3 weeks, all I could listen to was Celtic songs. I kept thinking, I'm supposed to move here. That's what this is. I'm supposed to move to Ireland. And I said, but I don't have any Irish in me. And I said, how about you? And John said, well, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? I said, your name's Giesler. You're probably German like me. And he goes, well, that's my adopted name.
Oh.
And I said, well, we need a 23andMe. So signed up immediately. We got them back. This man is 77% Irish.
Wow.
And I'm 25% Irish. And then we began to research farther and farther. Both of our families lived in England. Both families left in the 1750s and moved to where? Wicklow, Ireland.
No way.
And there we were with heritage in Ireland. And that's why we returned just 3 months ago to be married there. because there was a connection there.
And see, that's the whole spirit of the show, you know, of that, to be able to kind of step literally and figuratively in the steps of your ancestors. I mean, there's just no feeling in the world like that, because in my mind, everybody wants a sense of belonging.
Absolutely.
Later in the show, we share one of our viewers' treasures remembered.
The Fedora Foundation supports the collection, preservation, and distribution of diverse stories of traditions, values, and culture through Family Heritage Stories on TV and online at familyheritagestories.org. Well, but why? Why do we do this? Here's our why. We want to give examples and ideas of stories that can be passed down from generation to generation. Because if those stories aren't passed down, it's as though those people never existed. Now, I know some of you are out there saying, oh, I don't have a story. No, everyone has a story. Stories have power. They help us understand each other. One of my favorite stories was from a woman by the name of Romaine, 103 years old. I asked her, Romaine, do you remember the first time you drove a car? Her eyes lit up and she started moving her arm in rhythm. So, oh yeah, it's my daddy's 1917 Ford Coupe. I was 12 years old. I ran it into the ditch, and Daddy made me go into the garage and do 50 shift patterns before he'd let me drive it again. That was the story. When Romaine passed away, I went to her celebration of life, and her family surprised me, gave me a big hug, and said, Doug, I don't think you understand what that interview meant. We'd never heard the car story. We watched with Romaine over and over again, and now we have her story in her words that we can keep forever. The power of stories is amazing. The power to connect generations through stories. Wow. Please learn the stories of your grandparents, and then in turn, pass those down to your grandchildren. Because as Deanne Jensen said, when they're gone, they're gone. And then you wish you would have asked them, how did you get through those tough times? Broadcasting from Lanny Bernard Gallery, you're watching Family Heritage Stories. We'll be right back.
Fill your heart with Ireland. Discover more at ireland.com.
You learn a lot about traditions, values, and culture when you travel.
This week, we are visiting the southwest of Ireland. Wait a minute, this doesn't sound like DougJessop. That's right. My name is Zach Barry, and I'm the editor. Anyway, the southwest corner of the Republic of Ireland is famous for their bright green pastures and numerous national parks. Now, the easiest way to get around these rural areas is by car. Here's something you might not know. With a valid American driver's license, you are allowed to rent and drive a car in Ireland. Just make sure that you stay on the left side of the road. We drove down the narrow rural roads until we came upon the quaint town of Killarney in County Kerry, where you can find the Muckross Loop, an 11-mile path around the Muckross Lake. There are many ways to get around. You can take a horse-drawn carriage like these people. Or you can find a place like Killarney Rent-A-Bike, where, for €16, they'll provide you a bike and a helmet. And then we were off to explore the wonderful sights of the Muckross Loop. Our first stop took us to a majestic-looking building. This is the Muckross Abbey. Founded in 1448, this abbey was used as a place of worship until the 18th century. This graveyard is still in active use, as its most recent addition was made in 2012. It was breathtaking to see the original stonework and the large yew tree in the courtyard. We even climbed the ancient worn steps to see the old bell tower. Taking the road further down, we left the 1400s and entered into the 19th century with the Muckross House. You can take a tour of the house and explore the grounds, including a working dairy farm. For the final stop of our journey, we biked down to this bridge. And after about a 7-minute walk in the lush forest, we came upon the Torque Waterfall. It was a real sight to behold. Broadcasting from Killarney National Park in Ireland, I'm Zach Barry.
Objects with stories, our treasures remembered.
You are a very well-dressed woman, okay, and you've got all these beautiful objects, and you got this cameo, and you have some of those around here. And to me, objects with stories are treasures remembered, and sometimes it's passed down from generation to generation. So this cameo, from what I understand that you're wearing, has a special story. So where did you get that one?
Well, I got it from my mother, but I know it was my Grandma Jolly.
Okay, so how far? So you got it from your mom, and your mother's name was?
Laprille.
Laprille, okay. And who did Laprille get it from?
And she probably got it from her mother, Shalisa.
Shalisa, okay. And who does Shalisa get it from?
And Shalisa probably got it from Grandma Jolly. And that's who I remember wearing it.
Wow. And so what was Grandma Jolly's first name?
Isabella.
Isabella. So that's Isabella's brooch. Okay. Wow. That's pretty neat. And I'm guessing that's going to get passed down to somebody. Yeah, okay. So they need to know that story. Everyone has a story.
And sometimes those stories are told through music.
If you find it's me you're missing, if you're hoping I'll return to your thoughts, I'll soon be listening. In the road I'll stop and turn, then the wind will set me racing as my journey nears its end, and the path sparrows stop their singing. I'll be homeward bound
We started with a bun, but then we added potato flakes, that's right, potatoes. Then 100% Irish beef, but we said it needs to be more Irish, so boom, charlevoix cheddar, more beef, and 100% Irish bacon.
Rashers.
Then kale slaw and Ballymaloe relish.
Oh yeah.
Then we stuck a load of flags in it, put it in an oak box on a woolen blanket in the burren, and played this with your man again. No, we didn't. Because this is all about the ingredients, the McMore. It's the best of Ireland in a bun.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
What makes you smile? Spry mouthwash helps me smile. I think it might help you too.
It's our honor to be able to help people remember where they came from.
The Fedora Foundation supports the collection, preservation, and distribution of diverse stories of traditions, values, and culture through Family Heritage Stories, on TV and online at familyheritagestories.org.
How do you want to be remembered? With another episode of Family Heritage Stories, I'm Nisha DeGaring.
And I'm Doug Jessup.